What happens when a man who has everything realizes he has nothing at all? Dorian Vale was a king ruling from a Fifth Avenue skyscraper, a millionaire who bought and sold pieces of the New York skyline. His beautiful pregnant wife, Celine Marin, was his most prized possession. But one rainy Tuesday, his kingdom crumbled. He came home not to a warm embrace, but to a cold, empty apartment and a single white envelope on his pillow. The letter inside didn't just announce her departure, it held up a mirror to a monster he didn't know he'd become. This is the story of a lifetime of regret, a desperate search for a ghost, and the agonizing journey of a man trying to redeem a soul he sold for success. Before we begin, take a moment and comment your city below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from around the world. Now, let's dive in. The rain fell on New York City in relentless gray sheets, blurring the jewels of light from the traffic-choked streets 57 floors below. From his vantage point in the penthouse apartment on Fifth Avenue, Dorian Vale saw the city not as a collection of human lives, but as a complex, beautiful machine he had learned to master. At 36, he was a titan of real estate development, a man whose name was etched onto the glass and steel of the city's newest and most audacious structures. He was a success story written in concrete and billion-dollar deals. His apartment was a testament to this success, a minimalist masterpiece of marble, chrome, and glass. It was less a home than a gallery, curated to project an image of untouchable power and sophisticated taste. It was also, Dorian was beginning to realize, profoundly silent. The silence had grown louder in recent months, a creeping, insidious thing that even the hum of the city couldn't drown out. It was a silence that emanated from his wife, Selena Marin. He found her in the nursery. The room was the only one in the apartment that felt truly alive, painted a soft, dreamy cerulean blue with a mural of gentle, smiling whales swimming through a starry cosmos on the main wall. Selena Marin had painted it herself, every star and every wave a testament to her quiet, patient love. She was standing before the mural now, her back to him, one hand resting on the swell of her belly, 8 months into her pregnancy. "The painter called," Dorian said, his voice echoing slightly in the large, open-plan living space as he walked towards her. He loosened his silk tie, the knot a symbol of the day's corporate battles, one as usual. "He said the shade of white for the trim you picked, Chantilly lace, is on back order. He suggested simply white. I told him to go ahead." Celine Marin didn't turn. "You should have asked me, Dorian." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried a weight that made the vast room feel small. "It's just white paint, Celine. It makes no difference." He came to stand behind her, his hands wanting to go to her waist, to claim the familiar curve of her body. But he hesitated. There was a fragile tension around her, a force field of unspoken feelings he didn't know how to penetrate. "It makes a difference to me," she said, finally turning. Her face, usually a canvas of warmth and light, was pale. Her large hazel eyes, which once looked at him with unadulterated adoration, now held a deep, sorrowful weariness. "The Chantilly has a softer, warmer undertone. The simply white is stark. It's cold, cold." The word hung in the air between them, a perfect description of the apartment, of the city below, of the space that had grown between their two hearts. "I'll call him back," Dorian conceded, a flicker of irritation passing through him. It was just paint. Why did she have to make everything so emotional? He dealt in absolutes, in profit margins and structural integrity. The nuances of her emotional landscape were a foreign territory he had long since stopped trying to map. "Don't bother," she said, turning back to her whales. "It's already done." Later that evening, dinner was another exercise in silence. Dorian scrolled through market reports on his phone, while Celine Marin pushed a piece of grilled salmon around her plate. He could feel her watching him, could feel the weight of her unspoken words. But he didn't look up. He didn't know what to say. He had given her everything, hadn't he? The penthouse, the unlimited credit card, the security of his name. What more could she possibly want? "I went to Dr. Evans today," she said, her voice pulling him from a spreadsheet detailing leveraged buyouts. Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes still on the screen. "The baby's heart rate is strong. He's growing perfectly. She said I need to avoid stress." Good, he murmured, typing a quick reply to his COO. "We'll hire a third housekeeper if you're feeling overwhelmed." A small, sad smile touched Selena Marin's lips. It was a smile he hadn't seen before, one of pity. That's not the kind of stress she was talking about, Dorian. He finally put the phone down, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "What is it, Celine? What's wrong? Is it about the party on Saturday? If you don't want to go, we won't. I'll make an excuse." "It's not the party," she said, her eyes glistening. "It's this. Us. You're here, but you're a million miles away. You're looking at me, but you don't see me. You're having a child with me, but I feel utterly, completely alone." The accusation stung. It was unfair. He was working himself to the bone for them, for their future, for this child. "That's not true," he said, his voice defensive. "Everything I do is for you, for this family." "No, Dorian," she whispered, and the certainty in her voice chilled him. "Everything you do is for the win, for the deal, for the next building. I just happen to be living in one of them." She stood up, leaving her full plate on the table, and walked to their bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. The click of the latch was as loud as a gunshot in the silent apartment. Dorian sat there for a long time, the glow of his phone illuminating a face set in a grim, resentful mask. He didn't understand. He had provided the perfect life. He had built her a gilded cage and filled it with treasures, and still she was unhappy. He picked up his phone again, the familiar world of numbers and deals a comforting balm to the confusing sting of her words. He had a problem with a zoning commissioner in Brooklyn. He would focus on that. It was a problem he knew how to solve. He went to bed late, slipping under the cool, high thread count sheets. Selena Marin was turned away from him, a silent, unmoving form in the darkness. He didn't try to touch her. He simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, the regret of their non-conversation a bitter taste in his mouth. He'd make it up to her, he thought. After this big deal closed, he'd take her away. Maybe to the Maldives. He'd buy her a new piece of jewelry, something shiny to distract her. He fell asleep planning the solution, the way he always did, confident that every problem had a price, a strategy, a fix. He was wrong. He awoke the next morning to the relentless, cheerful sunlight of a city that had washed itself clean. The rain was gone. But the silence in the apartment was different. It was no longer a heavy, oppressive presence. It was a void. An absence. Selena Marin's side of the bed was empty, the sheets cold to the touch. That wasn't unusual. She was often an early riser. But the closet door was ajar. He saw a gap where her favorite suitcase used to be. A prickle of unease ran down his spine. "Celine?" he called out, his voice hoarse. No answer. He walked through the silent apartment. The kitchen was pristine, untouched. The nursery door was closed. He pushed it open, half expecting to find her standing before the mural. The room was empty. The soft blue of the walls seemed to mock him. He walked back into the master bedroom, his heart starting to beat a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm against his ribs. And then he saw it. Propped against the mountain of pillows on his side of the bed was a single white envelope. It was plain, unadorned, with his name written on the front in her elegant, familiar script. Dorian. His hands trembled as he picked it up. It felt impossibly heavy. He sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress sighing under his weight, and tore it open. The letter inside was written on the same thick, creamy stationery she used for her thank you notes. There were 3 pages, filled with her handwriting. He saw the faint, dark smudges of teardrops blurring some of the ink. He began to read. My dearest Dorian, if you are reading this, it means I have finally found the courage to do what I should have done a long time ago. I have left. Please, do not try to find me. There is nothing a private investigator or a dozen of your high-powered lawyers can do. I am not a problem to be solved or a negotiation to be won. I am a person, and I am gone. I used to love you with a ferocity that scared me. I remember the man I met at that little gallery in Chelsea. The one who didn't just look at the price tag of a painting, but at the brushstrokes. The one who asked about my dreams, not just my name. He listened. He saw me. I don't know where that man went, Dorian, but he hasn't lived in this apartment for a very long time. You have given me a beautiful cage, but I have been slowly suffocating in it. You surrounded me with luxury, but starved me of affection. You are preparing to be a father, but you have forgotten how to be a husband. I watched you at dinner last night, your face illuminated by the cold blue light of your phone, and I finally understood. Your heart is not here. It is in the skyline, in the next deal, in the relentless pursuit of more. And I will not, bring our child into this world of emotional poverty. Our son deserves to be more than a future heir to a real estate empire. He deserves a father whose hands are not always busy holding a phone, whose eyes are not always scanning a contract. He deserves laughter and bedtime stories, and a father who is present in spirit, not just in body. I looked at you, and I knew with a bone-deep certainty that you could not give him that. Not now. Maybe not ever. And then there is the other reason. The one my heart shattered to discover, and my pride tried so hard to ignore. I know about Vera Nocturne. I've known for months. The late-night board meetings, the scent of a perfume that wasn't mine on your coat, the transactional coldness in your eyes when you thought I wasn't looking. Did you think I was stupid? Or did you simply not care enough to be more careful? I think I know the answer. She is a part of your world, the world of deals and assets. I suppose, in your mind, it was just another merger. That betrayal was the final key that unlocked my cage. It wasn't just my heart you broke. You broke the foundation of our family before it was even built. You broke the promise we made, and for that, I can never forgive you. I have taken nothing that you would consider of value. Only my clothes, my painting supplies, and the child you helped create but have never truly known. Do not worry about us. We will be safe. More importantly, we will be free. Perhaps one day you will look around at your kingdom of glass and steel and realize how empty it is. Perhaps you will remember the man who loved art and dreamed of more than just buildings. Perhaps you will feel an ounce of the regret that I feel for what we have lost. Goodbye, Dorian. Selena. The pages slipped from his numb fingers and fluttered to the floor. The world tilted on its axis. Vera Nocturne. It had meant nothing. A stupid, meaningless distraction. A transaction, just as Celine Marin had said. How could she put that on the same level as everything else? How could she leave over white paint and a meaningless fling? The initial shock gave way to a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. How dare she? He would find her. He would drag her back. He would fix this. He grabbed his phone, his thumb hovering over the contact for Calder Wynn, the best private investigator money could buy. This was just another problem. A bigger, more complicated problem, but a problem nonetheless. He stood up and stalked to the window, staring down at his city, his kingdom. But for the first time, it didn't look like a machine he had mastered. It looked like a cold, indifferent maze. He looked at his reflection in the glass, a powerful man in a multi-million-dollar penthouse. And behind that reflection, he saw the empty nursery, the pale blue walls, and the ghost of a woman who had seen him more clearly than he had ever seen himself. The first tremor of a regret so profound it felt like a physical illness shook him. The rage began to curdle into something else, something cold and terrifying. Fear. He had just lost something that wasn't on any balance sheet, and for the first time in his life, Dorian Vale had no idea how to get it back. The first 48 hours were a blur of controlled fury. Dorian moved through his life with the brutal efficiency of a man launching a hostile takeover. His target, his own wife. "I want her found, Calder," Dorian barked into his phone, pacing the length of his living room like a caged panther. The letter lay on the marble coffee table, a constant searing accusation. "I don't care what it costs. I want to know where she is, who she's with, and what she had for breakfast. I want her found by yesterday." On the other end of the line, Calder Wynn was silent for a moment. Wynn was a former NYPD detective, a man who moved with a quiet deliberation that Dorian often mistook for slowness. He was methodical, unflappable, and utterly unimpressed by wealth. "Dorian, this isn't a corporate espionage case," Calder said, his voice a low, gravelly counterpoint to Dorian's hysteria. "She's your pregnant wife. She's a private citizen. She hasn't broken any laws by leaving." "She's carrying my son!" Dorian roared, the words echoing in the sterile emptiness of the apartment. "She took my son!" "She took her son," Calder corrected him gently but firmly. "And from the sounds of it, she left you a detailed explanation as to why. Have you considered that finding her might not be the answer right now?" "Just find her," Dorian snarled and hung up. He didn't wait. He unleashed the full arsenal of his power. He had his legal team check for any large withdrawals or credit card activity. Nothing? He had his tech security guy, a wiry genius he kept on an exorbitant retainer to protect his company from cyber threats, try to trace her digital footprint. It was a ghost town. Her social media accounts were deleted. Her email was deactivated. Her phone was disconnected. The digital life she had maintained as Mrs. Celine Marin Vale had been systematically and cleanly erased. It was a professional-level disappearance. A chill went down Dorian's spine. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment emotional decision. This was planned, meticulously. For weeks, maybe months, while she had been smiling sadly at him across the dinner table, she had been plotting her escape. The second call he made was to Vera Nocturne. She answered on the second ring, her voice husky and suggestive. "Dorian, I was wondering when you'd call. I have the preliminary designs for the Hudson Yards lobby." "It's over," Dorian said, his voice flat and dead. There was a stunned silence. "What? What are you talking about? We have a meeting tomorrow." "Not the project. Us. Whatever this was, it's over. Don't call me again unless it's about work." "Dorian, wait," she began, her voice shifting from seductive to sharp. "You can't just—" He hung up on her too. He swiped her contact and deleted it, a hollow, symbolic gesture. He felt a fleeting, pathetic sense of accomplishment, as if cleaning up this one small, sordid mess could somehow undo the cataclysmic damage. But Selina Marin's words from the letter echoed in his mind. "Did you think I was stupid? Or did you simply not care enough to be more careful?" The truth was, he hadn't thought of her at all in those moments. That was the real crime. Days turned into a week. Calder Wynn's initial reports were thin, frustratingly so. Celine Marin had withdrawn a moderate amount of cash, $10,000, from a joint account 2 weeks before she left. Enough to live on for a while, but not enough to raise a flag. She had sold some of her own jewelry, pieces she'd owned before she met him, through a discreet private dealer. She had paid cash. She hadn't used a driver's license or passport. She hadn't bought a plane or train ticket under her own name. "She took a taxi to Penn Station," Calder reported over the phone a week later, Paid cash. We lost her in the crowd. She could have gotten on any train, any bus, or even just walked out the other side and gotten into a different cab. She knew the station's camera blind spots. She's smart, Dorian. So find someone who saw her? We're trying. But she wore a baseball cap and sunglasses. In a city of 8 million people, all trying to mind their own business, she might as well have been invisible. The power Dorian wielded with such precision in his professional life was useless here. He couldn't bully a ghost. He couldn't threaten a memory. He started to unravel. He snapped at his staff. A multi-million-dollar negotiation for a prime piece of midtown real estate stalled because he was too distracted, too volatile. His empire, which had seemed so solid and untouchable, began to show hairline fractures. He couldn't stand to be in the apartment. Every surface screamed of her absence. The half-finished painting in her art studio, a landscape of a wind-swept coast he didn't recognize, was a silent monument to her abandoned life. He found himself wandering into the nursery, the soft blue walls closing in on him. He touched the painted whales, his fingers tracing the delicate lines. He had seen her paint this, had walked past her with a nod and a distracted smile, never truly appreciating the love she was pouring onto the walls. He'd seen it as decorating. She'd seen it as building a world for their son. One evening, unable to bear the silence, he went to the bar at the Baccarat Hotel, a place of crystal and quiet money where he'd often taken Céline Marin for celebratory drinks. He ordered a Macallan 25, the expensive scotch doing little to numb the ache in his chest. As he stared into the amber liquid, a memory surfaced. It was from 2 years ago, their first anniversary. He had just closed the biggest deal of his career. He'd taken her here and presented her with a diamond necklace, a string of perfect, cold stones. She had smiled, thanked him, and put it on. But later that night, as she was taking it off, she'd said, "It's beautiful, Dorian. But you know what I would have loved? A picnic in Central Park. Just us, no phones." He had laughed it off. "Darling, I don't do picnics. I do this." He gestured around at their lavish suite. Now, sitting alone at the bar, the memory was a physical blow. He hadn't been listening. She had been speaking a different language, one of connection and simple moments, while he had only been fluent in transactions and grand gestures. He had been trying to buy her happiness when all she wanted was his time. A month after she vanished, Calder called with a potential lead. A woman matching Céline Marin's description had been seen in a small town in Vermont, buying art supplies. Dorian's heart leaped. He was in his car, a sleek black Aston Martin, and heading north within the hour, a frantic, desperate hope clawing at his throat. He drove for 4 hours, the city skyline receding in his rearview mirror, replaced by the green tapestry of the countryside. He arrived in the picturesque town of Woodstock, a place of covered bridges and quaint storefronts. It felt like a different world. It felt like a world Céline Marin would love. Calder had given him the name of the art supply store. Dorian walked in, the bell over the door chiming softly. An older woman with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers looked up from behind the counter. Dorian showed her a photo of Céline Marin from his phone, a picture of her smiling on a beach in the Hamptons, the sun catching the light in her hair. The woman studied the photo. "Yes," she said slowly. "A woman who looked like this was in here, about 3 weeks ago. She was lovely, very quiet. She bought a lot of oils, mostly blues and grays." "Did she say where she was staying? Where she was from?" Dorian asked, his voice tight with anticipation. "No," the woman said, shaking her head. "She paid in cash. But she did talk for a moment about the light. She said she was trying to find a place where the light was just right. Said the city light was too harsh, too artificial." The woman looked at him, her gaze perceptive. "Are you her husband?" "Yes," Dorian said. "I need to find her. It's urgent. She's pregnant." The woman's kind expression hardened slightly. "Son," the look in that woman's eyes, it was the look of someone running from something, not to something. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is to let them go. His hope deflated like a punctured lung. He thanked her and left, the bell chiming his lonely retreat. He spent the rest of the day driving through the winding Vermont roads, peering at every passing woman, every remote farmhouse, hoping for a miracle. There was none. It was a dead end. She had passed through, a ghost on her way to somewhere else. Driving back to New York that night, defeat settled into his bones, cold and heavy. The frantic energy of the initial search was gone, replaced by a hollow, gnawing despair. He wasn't just losing his wife. He was losing his sense of self. The man who could solve any problem, who could bend the world to his will, was powerless. He walked back into his silent marble tomb of an apartment. For the first time, he didn't see it as a symbol of his success. He saw it for what it was, a cold, empty museum of a life he had failed to live. He saw the unwatered orchid on the console table, its petals withered and brown. Celine Marin had loved that orchid. He had never once thought to water it. It was a small thing, a stupid thing. But in that moment, the dead orchid felt like the perfect metaphor for his marriage. He had provided the beautiful vase, the expensive room with the perfect view, but he had neglected to provide the one thing it needed to survive. He sank onto a ridiculously expensive Italian sofa, not in anger, but in a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. The search was futile because he was searching for the wrong thing. He was trying to find her location, a point on a map. But the real loss, the thing he had to find, was something inside himself. And he was beginning to suspect it wasn't there anymore. The failure in Vermont marked a turning point. The frantic outward search, fueled by anger and the desperate need for control, slowly fizzled out, replaced by a torturous inward journey. The autumn leaves turned from green to gold to a brittle brown, carpeting Central Park in a melancholic blanket. The city donned its festive lights for the holidays, but for Dorian, the cheerful glow only seemed to accentuate the darkness within him. His professional life, once the bedrock of his identity, became an unbearable chore. The thrill of the deal was gone. He'd sit in boardrooms surrounded by men who spoke his old language of leverage and acquisition, and their words would sound like meaningless noise. He'd stare out the window of his corner office at the spires of the city, the buildings he'd helped raise, and feel nothing but a hollow echo. He was an architect of a world he no longer wanted to inhabit. His partners grew concerned, whispering about his distraction, his sudden lack of ruthlessness. The Vale Empire, for the first time, looked vulnerable. Dorian stopped trying to fill the silence of the apartment. He let it consume him. He fired 2 of the 3 housekeepers, wanting to be alone in his self-imposed exile. He started to see the apartment through Selena Marin's eyes. He saw the cold, impersonal art he'd bought as an investment, not for its beauty. He saw the furniture, chosen for its brand name and not its comfort. He saw the vast, empty spaces where laughter should have been. His evenings were spent not with Calder Wynn's reports, which had dwindled to nothing, but with the ghost of his wife. He began a new kind of search, not for her body, but for her soul. He started in her art studio. The room, at the far end of the penthouse, had been her sanctuary. Sunlight poured in from a skylight he'd had installed at her request. He'd seen it as an expensive indulgence. Now he realized it was her lifeline. He ran his hand over her easel, the wood worn smooth. He looked at her canvases, stacked against the wall. Most were landscapes, moody, atmospheric scenes of stormy skies and churning seas. He'd always dismissed them as her little hobby. Now he saw the raw, untamed emotion in every brushstroke, He saw her loneliness, her yearning for something wild and real, a stark contrast to their sterile, ordered life. On a small wooden desk in the corner, he found what he was looking for, though he didn't know it until he saw it. A leather-bound journal. It wasn't a diary of daily events, but a collection of thoughts, sketches, and pasted-in scraps of poetry. His hands shook as he opened it. Reading it felt like a profound violation, yet he couldn't stop. It was the only way to hear her voice again. The early entries were filled with a light and hope that pierced him to the core. October 12th. Met a man named Dorian tonight. He has the most intense eyes, like he's trying to solve the world. But when he looked at my paintings, he fell silent. He didn't talk about market value. He asked me what I was feeling when I mixed the blues for the sky. I think I'm in trouble. Dorian had to close the book, a sob catching in his throat. He remembered that night. He remembered being struck by her sincerity, a quality as rare as a flawless diamond in his world. He had been that man. Where had he gone? He forced himself to read on, tracing the slow, painful erosion of her hope. March 4th. Dorian closed the Sterling Tower deal. He was electric, a force of nature. He bought me a Cartier bracelet to celebrate. I wish he'd just come home and we could have ordered pizza and watched a movie. The bracelet is beautiful, but it feels so heavy on my wrist. August 21st. I told Dorian I was pregnant. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the man I fell in love with. He was stunned. Then his eyes lit up. He held me so tight. He whispered, "We're going to have a family." I cried with happiness. Please, God, let this be real. Let this change things. The next entry was dated 2 months later, October 30th. He's planning. Not for the baby, but for the heir. He talks about trust funds, boarding schools, and which wing of the penthouse will become the children's quarters. He hired a consultant to design the nursery. I told her I wanted to paint it myself. She looked at me with pity. I am becoming a decorative feature in my own life, in my own child's life. The most painful entries were about Vera Nocturne. Celine Marin never used her name. She was just her. February 11th. He came home late again, smelled of jasmine and ambition. A perfume I've smelled before on a scarf in his car. It's not just the betrayal of the body, it's the betrayal of the mind. He shares a world with her that I cannot enter, a world of sharp edges and cold calculations. I think he finds it more exciting than my world of soft colors and quiet love. Perhaps he's right. Dorian threw the journal across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud and fell to the floor. Pages splayed open. He was gasping for air, the weight of his cruelty pressing down on him, suffocating him. He hadn't just been negligent. He had been actively cruel in his blindness. He had taken her light and ounce by ounce extinguished it. The date of the baby's birth came and went in late November. Dorian spent the day locked in the apartment, drinking himself into a stupor. He imagined her in a hospital somewhere, alone and scared. He imagined her holding their son for the first time. His son. A boy he had a name for. Alexander. A strong name, a founder's name he'd once told Selena Marin. She had smiled sadly and said, "I like Oren." He wondered what she had named him. Was he Alexander, or was he Oren? The not knowing was a special kind of hell. The new year arrived, a time for resolutions Dorian had no will to make. His only resolution was to understand. He picked up the journal again. The final entries were a chilling descent into resolve. March 18th. I can't do this anymore. I saw my reflection today and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were empty. My son kicks inside me, a vibrant, powerful life force. He deserves a mother who is alive, not a ghost haunting a penthouse. I cannot let him be born into this gilded cage. He will not learn that love is a transaction and silence is a currency. April 5th. I've started to make a plan. It's terrifying, but the thought of staying is more so. I am erasing myself bit by bit, so I can be reborn somewhere else. For him, I will take him to a place with a wide-open sky, a place where he can hear the ocean and feel the wind, a place where his mother's smile is real. The final entry was a single devastating line. April 29th. Goodbye, Dorian. I hope one day you forgive yourself. I don't know if I can. He finally understood. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of preservation. She hadn't run from him in anger. She had run to save herself and their child. The psychological conflict within him reached a crescendo. The arrogant tycoon and the broken man were at war. For months, he had been mourning his loss, his wounded pride, his shattered control. Now, for the first time, he began to mourn for her. He mourned the pain he had caused her, the joy he had stolen from her, the beautiful, hopeful heart he had so carelessly broken. His regret was no longer a selfish ache. It was a profound, empathetic sorrow. And with that shift, a sliver of light pierced his self-inflicted darkness. The rage was gone. The desperation was gone. All that remained was a vast, quiet ocean of remorse. He knew he had to change. Not to win her back. He had lost that right forever. But to honor the man she had once believed he was. He picked up the phone, but this time, he didn't call Calder Wynn. He called the head of his foundation, the charitable arm of his company he'd always treated as a tax write-off and a PR tool. "Elias," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "We're going to make some changes. Big changes. Liquidate the holdings in the Veyron project? Yes, all of them. We're going to start a new fund, a grant for undiscovered artists, specifically young women. We'll call it the Celine Marin Grant." He was deconstructing his empire, piece by piece, and trying to build something that she might have admired. It was too little, too late. He knew that. But it was a start. It was an apology whispered into the void, a penance for a lifetime of sin he was only just beginning to comprehend. He was no longer searching for his wife. He was searching for his own soul. The years that followed were a quiet, steady dismantling of the man Dorian Vale had been. The process was not a dramatic overnight transformation, but a slow, arduous chipping away at a lifetime of hardened ego. Regret was his constant companion, a shadow that walked with him through the now hushed corridors of his life. He started by selling the penthouse. The decision shocked his business partners and the society pages that had once chronicled his every move. To them, the Fifth Avenue apartment was the ultimate symbol of his arrival, the peak of the mountain. To Dorian, it had become a mausoleum of his failures, every marble surface reflecting a painful memory. He sold it at a loss to a Russian oligarch, not caring about the money. He just wanted out. He moved into a modest but elegant brownstone in the West Village, a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a sense of history. The space was smaller, warmer, filled with wood and books instead of chrome and glass. For the first time in his adult life, he lived in a home, not a statement. He began to systematically restructure his company. The aggressive, borderline predatory tactics that had made him a legend were phased out. He pulled out of deals that would displace long-term residents, he invested in sustainable green building practices, and he championed projects that included community spaces and affordable housing. His old rivals called him soft. His COO, a man who had worshipped Dorian's killer instinct, resigned in protest. Dorian let him go, without a fight. Profit was no longer the sole metric of his success. He was building a legacy Celine Marin would not have been ashamed of. The Celine Marin Grant became his quiet obsession. He poured millions into it. Not just his money, but his time. He, the man who couldn't be bothered to look at his wife's paintings, now spent his weekends in dusty art studios in Brooklyn and the Lower East Side, talking to young artists. He learned to listen again. He learned to see the world not as a balance sheet, but as a canvas of human emotion. He saw Celine Marin in every hopeful, paint-splattered young woman he met. He was funding their dreams in a desperate, futile attempt to atone for having crushed hers. He never stopped paying Calder Wynne. The PI had become less of an investigator and more of a confessor. Once a month, they would meet for coffee. The pretense of the active search was long gone. The meetings were a ritual of remembrance. "Anything?" Dorian would ask, the question a hollow echo of its former urgency. "Nothing, Dorian," Calder would reply gently. "It's been 5 years. Her trail is colder than a morgue slab. She did a masterful job." "She was masterful at everything she cared about," Dorian would say, a sad smile touching his lips. He no longer felt anger at her skill in disappearing, only a profound sense of respect. He never dated. Women were still drawn to him. The aura of power, though muted, was still there, now overlaid with a tragic, romantic mystique. But he was uninterested. It would feel like a betrayal, not to Selina Marin, but to the memory of his own failure. He was a monk in a monastery of his own making, his penance a life of quiet solitude. He kept only a few mementos of his former life with her. The half-finished painting from her studio now hung over the fireplace in his brownstone. The landscape of the windswept coast was a daily reminder of the world she had yearned for. He also kept her journal, not to torture himself with the painful memories, but as a sacred text, a guide to the man he was trying to become. One crisp autumn evening, 7 years after she had vanished, Dorian was at a small gallery in Chelsea, attending an exhibition for one of the first recipients of the Selina Marin grant. The artist, a fiercely talented young woman named Isla Rowan, was giving a speech. "I wouldn't be here without this grant," Isla said, her voice thick with emotion as she stood before her large, vibrant canvases. "It's not just the money. It was the belief. The founder of this grant, who wishes to remain anonymous, gave me the freedom to fail, the space to create, and the encouragement to speak my truth through my work. It's a gift of presence, not just of wealth. A gift of presence." The word struck Dorian with the force of a physical blow. It was the very thing Selina Marin had accused him of withholding. He stood at the back of the crowded gallery, a ghost in his own life, and felt a tear slide down his cheek. He had become the man Selina Marin had needed, but 7 years too late. Later, as the crowd thinned, Isla approached him. "Mr. Vale, thank you for coming. It means the world to me." She knew, as did all the recipients, that he was the anonymous founder. "The work is extraordinary, Isla," he said, his voice hoarse. "You have a powerful voice." "I had a good teacher," she said, smiling. "My mentor. She's the one who encouraged me to apply for your grant. She's an artist herself, though she rarely shows her own work anymore. She says her masterpiece is her son." A strange stillness came over Dorian. The low hum of the gallery faded away. "Your mentor?" he asked, his heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. "Yeah, she's amazing," Isla gushed, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. "She lives up in Oregon, a tiny town on the coast called Cannon Beach. She moved there years ago from back east. Her name is Selina Marin Vance." The world tilted. Vance, Selina Marin's mother's maiden name. Oregon, a tiny town on the coast, the windswept landscape in the painting above his fireplace. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered for 7 agonizing years, slammed into place with a terrifying, beautiful clarity. Isla was still talking. "Her son, Oren, is the sweetest kid. He's about 7 now. The spitting image of her. Oren, not Alexander, Oren." Dorian could barely breathe. He felt a dizzying rush of emotions, shock, terror, and a wild, uncontainable joy that was so foreign it felt like pain. She was alive. She was okay. She had a son. His son. "Mr. Vale, are you all right?" Isla asked, her face etched with concern. "You're as white as a sheet." Dorian swallowed hard, forcing himself to nod. "Yes, fine. Just A bit overwhelmed by the beauty of your work. He managed a weak smile. Excuse me, I need to get some air. He walked out of the gallery and onto the cool Chelsea street, his legs unsteady. He leaned against the cold brick of the building, gulping in the night air. He had the answer. After 7 years, 2,055 days of regret, he had a location. Cannon Beach, Oregon. The old Dorian would have been on a private jet within the hour. He would have descended on the town with a team of lawyers, ready to claim what was his. He would have made demands, asserted his rights, torn her peaceful world apart in his selfish need for reunion. But he was not the old Dorian. He stood there on the pavement, the city lights blurring through his tears, and was faced with the ultimate test of his redemption. What do you do when you find the thing you've mourned for a lifetime? He knew he had no rights. He had abdicated them in a storm of neglect and betrayal. Showing up on her doorstep would be an act of supreme selfishness, a violation of the peace she had fought so hard to create for herself and their son. His penance demanded one final sacrifice. To truly love her, he had to let her go. Even now that he knew where she was, he could not, would not, be the storm that wrecked her beautiful, wind-swept coast. But he had to see him. Just once. He had to see the son whose existence had reshaped his own. He would go not as a father, not as a husband, but as a ghost. He would see, and then he would vanish, leaving her to the life she had chosen. It was the only way to prove he had truly changed. It was the only way to finally forgive himself. The flight to Portland was the longest 3 hours of Dorian's life. He flew commercial, wedged into a window seat in coach, the anonymity a comfort. The man who once crisscrossed the country in a Gulf Stream now watched the patchwork of America slide by beneath him, a landscape of lives he knew nothing about. He was just another man on a journey, his heart a tangled mess of hope and dread. From Portland, he rented a nondescript sedan and drove west, towards the coast. The urban sprawl gave way to dense evergreen forests, the air growing cooler, tinged with the scent of pine and salt. As he neared the ocean, the sky opened up into a vast, moody canvas of gray and silver. Exactly like the skies in Selena Marin's early paintings, he was driving into her art, into her soul. Cannon Beach was even more beautiful and understated than he had imagined. Weather-beaten cedar-shingled houses were tucked amongst wind-swept trees. Art galleries and small independent bookstores lined the main street. In the distance, the iconic Haystack Rock loomed out of the mist, a silent, ancient sentinel. This was the world she had chosen. A world of nature, art, and quiet community. A world that was the absolute antithesis of his Fifth Avenue penthouse. He didn't know what he was going to do. He had no plan beyond seeing, observing. He checked into a small, unassuming motel at the edge of town, using a fake name. For 2 days, he was a ghost. He walked the misty beaches, the cold sand crunching under his shoes. He watched the waves crash against the shore, a relentless, soothing rhythm. He was terrified of seeing her, and terrified that he wouldn't. He learned from the talkative owner of the local coffee shop that there was a small community art fair at the town hall that weekend. The whole town turns out for it, the owner said. Even Celine Marin Vance usually puts a piece or two in. Her stuff is incredible. Mostly keeps to herself, her and her boy, Oren. But a lovely woman. His heart hammered against his ribs. Her and her boy, Oren. The day of the art fair was overcast and blustery. Dorian wore a simple jacket and a baseball cap, his face obscured, his heart in his throat. The town hall was a warm, bright space, filled with the murmur of conversation, the scent of cider, and a riot of local creativity. There were handmade quilts, intricate pottery, and vibrant photographs of the coastline. And then he saw it. In a corner, away from the main thoroughfare, was a single, large canvas. It was unsigned, but he would have known the brush strokes anywhere on Earth. It was a painting of Haystack Rock at sunrise, but the genius of it was in the foreground. On the beach, a small boy with a mop of dark, curly hair was holding his mother's hand. They were painted from behind, two small figures looking out at the immense beauty of the world. The painting wasn't just a landscape. It was a portrait of love, of safety, of a world complete in itself. He was so engrossed he didn't notice the small figure who darted past him, laughing. "Oren, slow down." The voice. It was hers. Older, richer, but unmistakably Celine Marin's. Dorian's blood ran cold. He froze, his back to her, his hand gripping the edge of a display table to steady himself. He forced himself to turn, slowly, carefully. And there she was. She was more beautiful than he remembered. The years had been kind to her. There were fine lines around her eyes, but they were smile lines. The weary sadness that had haunted her in New York was gone, replaced by a calm, self-possessed serenity. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a worn wool sweater, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She was radiant, she was whole, and next to her, clutching a cookie, was the boy from the painting. He had Celine Marin's hazel eyes and gentle smile, but he had Dorian's dark, curly hair and the determined set of his jaw. He was a perfect, heartbreaking fusion of the two of them. He was Oren, his son. Oren looked up, and his eyes, for a fleeting, random second, met Dorian's from across the room. It was like looking at a ghost of himself, at a life he should have had. The boy, of course, saw nothing more than a stranger and quickly looked back to his mother, tugging on her sleeve. Celine Marin laughed, a sound so pure and lovely it broke Dorian's heart all over again, and knelt to wipe a smudge of chocolate from her son's cheek. In that simple, maternal gesture, Dorian saw a universe of love and contentment he had no part in and no right to disturb. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The final test of his 7-year penance. He could walk over there. He could say her name. He could shatter her peace and introduce a storm of confusion and pain into his son's life. Or he could leave. He looked at her, truly looked at her, one last time. He saw her happiness. He saw the beautiful life she had built from the ashes of the one he had destroyed. And he knew with a certainty that was both devastating and liberating what he had to do. His redemption wasn't in being with her. It was in loving her enough to stay away. As he turned to leave, her head lifted, as if she sensed a shift in the room's atmosphere. Her eyes scanned the crowd, a flicker of something. Curiosity, recognition, on her face. For one heart-stopping second, their gazes locked across the crowded room. He saw a flash of confusion in her eyes, a slight widening, the tilt of her head as if trying to place a familiar ghost. There was no anger, no fear, just a flicker of a long-forgotten past. Dorian held her gaze for a single, silent beat. He gave her the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. It was an apology, a farewell, a blessing. Then he turned and walked out of the town hall, out of the art fair, out of her life. For good. He didn't look back. He got in his rented car and drove away from Cannon Beach. The image of his son's face and his wife's peaceful smile burned into his memory. His lifetime of regret wasn't over. It was a scar he would always carry. But as he drove back towards the airport, a profound, quiet peace settled over him for the first time in 7 years. He had lost his wife and son, but he had finally found himself. He had become a man worthy of their memory, and that, in the end, was its own form of salvation. Before he left Portland, he did one last thing. He called his lawyer and arranged for the creation of an anonymous, irrevocable trust fund in the name of Oren Vance. It was a fortune, enough to ensure he would never want for anything. There were no strings attached, no way to trace it back to him. It was a final silent gift from a father his son would never know. A ghost's provision. A last whispered, "I'm sorry." Dorian Vale's story isn't about getting the girl back. It's about the devastating consequences of taking love for granted and the agonizing, lifelong journey toward redemption. He lost everything he thought he didn't need, only to realize it was all that ever mattered. His journey teaches us that true change isn't about grand gestures to win someone back, but about the quiet, painful work of becoming someone worthy of the love you lost. It's a raw and honest look at regret, and the difficult truth that some mistakes can't be fixed, only atoned for. If this story of love, loss, and the faint hope of redemption touched your heart, please let us know in the comments. What part of Dorian's journey resonated with you the most? Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who appreciates a deep, emotional story, and subscribe to our channel for more content that explores the complexities of the human heart. Thank you for watching.